They say that silence is empty, that it's the absence of noise, the space between words. But anyone who has ever had their heart broken knows the truth. Silence is heavy. It has a weight that can crush your lungs, a texture that feels like cold iron against your skin. And on that stormy night in the Hamptons, 7 years ago, the silence was loud enough to shatter a life. Rain hammered against the slate roof of the Sterling estate, a relentless, drowning rhythm that matched the beating of Elena Vance's heart. She was 19 then, young, foolish, so desperately in love that she had convinced herself class lines didn't matter. She stood outside the heavy mahogany doors of the library, shivering. Her maid's uniform was soaked through, clinging to her skin, but the cold she felt had nothing to do with the weather. She shouldn't have been there. She knew that. The West Wing was forbidden to staff after hours, but Roman had told her to meet him. Roman Sterling, the heir, the golden boy with the storm-gray eyes who had stolen kisses with her in the garden maze and whispered promises that made a servant girl feel like a queen. She reached for the handle, her fingers trembling, but a voice from inside stopped her cold. It was a voice like grinding gravel. Silas Thorne, Roman's uncle, the man who looked at anyone with a bank account under 7 figures as if they were livestock. "Be reasonable, Roman," Silas hissed, the sound seeping through the wood. "Your father doesn't have much time. The pack is unstable. The stocks are plummeting. We need strength. We need a merger that secures our territory, not a liability that exposes our throat." Elena held her breath. She pressed her ear closer to the wood, praying for Roman to cut him off, praying for Roman to tell him to go to hell. Then, the former alpha spoke. Roman's father. His voice was weak, rattled by the sickness that was killing him, but the authority was still there. "Silas is right, son. You are the future, Alpha. You don't get the luxury of a heart. You get a duty." A pause. A terrible, stretching pause. "The girl," the old man wheezed. "Elena. She is help, Roman, a human servant. She has no bloodline, no standing. If you take her as a mate, you will weaken the pack before you even take the throne." The street. "Clare family is offering an alliance. Billions in assets. Pure blood. You need that power." Elena's hand hovered over the doorknob. "Say it," she begged silently. "Tell them you love me. Tell them I'm not just help." "Cut her loose," Silas demanded, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Or we lose everything. The company, the legacy. Do it tonight, Roman, or I will handle it myself." Elena waited. The thunder cracked overhead, shaking the floorboards beneath her wet sneakers. She waited for Roman's rage. She waited for the sound of him defending her, defending them. But there was nothing. Just silence. Complete, suffocating silence. Roman Sterling, the boy who had sworn he would burn the world down for her, didn't say a word. He didn't fight. He didn't argue. He just let the words hang there, accepting them, accepting that she was nothing more than a liability to be cut loose. The betrayal hit her harder than a physical blow. It tore through her chest, leaving a gaping, hollow ache. She didn't wait to hear the rest. She couldn't. Elena turned and ran. She ran through the polished corridors where she had spent years dusting portraits of men who would never accept her. She burst out the side door, back into the raging storm. The wind whipped her hair across her face, blinding her. But she didn't stop. She ran until the lights of the Sterling mansion were just blurry stars in the distance. She stumbled near the edge of the estate, her knees hitting the muddy earth. She gasped for air, the rain mingling with the hot tears streaming down her face. Her hand went instinctively to her stomach. It was a secret she had been guarding for 2 weeks. A tiny, terrifying secret that was supposed to be a gift. She curled around herself in the mud, protecting the only thing she had left. "I won't let them hurt you," she whispered into the darkness, her voice breaking. "I won't let them turn you into him. I promise. We're going to run, baby. We're going to run so far they'll never find us." And she did. She ran from the money, the power, and the boy who had chosen a crown over her heart. 7 years. 7 years is a long time. It's long enough for a cell to replace every atom in the human body, long enough for a prince to become a king, and long enough for a girl to learn that happily ever afters are just stories rich people tell their children to help them sleep. The Queensboro of New York City didn't look anything like the Hamptons. The air here smelled of exhaust and stale, frying oil, not sea salt and hydrangeas. The Blue Velvet Jazz Club was a hole in the wall tucked between a laundromat and a bodega, The kind of place where the neon sign flickered and the floor always felt a little sticky. But it was safe. It was hidden. Backstage, in a dressing room the size of a closet, Elena Vance stared at her reflection in a mirror framed by burnt-out bulbs. She was 26 now. The softness of her teenage years had been chiseled away by exhaustion and survival. Her cheekbones were sharper, her eyes a little wearier, but the beauty was still there, undeniable and tragic, like a flower growing through pavement. She looked down at the pile of cash on the vanity. It was a pathetic sight, a stack of crumpled ones and fives, stained with beer and desperation. She counted it twice, hoping the math would change. It didn't. $74, she murmured, shoving the money into her purse. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. Rent was due in 3 days. The landlord, a man with wandering hands and zero patience, had already threatened to change the locks. Her phone buzzed on the counter. The screen was cracked, a spider web of glass over the picture of a smiling boy with messy dark hair and eyes the color of a storm. Elena picked up the phone, her posture softening instantly. "Hey, sweetie, is Mrs. Gable there?" "She's sleeping in the chair," a small voice whispered back. "Leo." He sounded so small, so hopeful. "Mom, are you coming home soon?" The question was a knife to the ribs. "I have one more set, Leo. Just one more, okay? Then I'll be there. Did you eat?" "Yeah, but I'm still kinda hungry." Elena closed her eyes, fighting the urge to scream. Hungry. Her 6-year-old son was hungry, and she was counting dollar bills in a basement in Queens. This was the stakes. This wasn't about pride anymore. It wasn't about her broken heart. It was about survival. It was about the little boy who had half of her soul and half of a billionaire's DNA, living off mac and cheese while his father sat on a throne of gold. "I'll bring you something good," Elena promised, forcing her voice to sound bright and steady. "I promise, baby. Go to sleep. I love you to the moon." "To the moon," he whispered back. She hung up, her grip on the phone white-knuckled. She took a deep breath, smoothing the cheap silk of her dress. She put on her mask, the smile, the allure, the performance. She wasn't Elena, the struggling mom, right now. She was the siren of the blue velvet. She pushed through the curtain and walked toward the stage. The club was hazy with smoke, filled with the low hum of conversation and the clink of glasses. It was a Tuesday night crowd, lonely men, tired workers, and shadows looking for a place to hide. But as Elena stepped up to the microphone, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It wasn't a sound. It was a feeling, a sudden drop in pressure, like the air being sucked out of the room before an explosion. The heavy front doors swung open. The bouncer, a man twice the size of a fridge, stepped aside with a look of genuine fear. And then, he walked in, Roman Sterling. He didn't walk. He prowled. He moved with a lethal, predatory grace that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. He was flanked by 4 men in dark suits, but you didn't look at them. You couldn't look at anyone but him. 7 years had changed him. The boyish softness was gone, replaced by hard, brutal angles. He was taller, broader, his shoulders straining against the fabric of a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than this entire building. His jaw was set in a line of permanent indifference. He looked cold, not just cool, frozen, like a man who had cut out his own heart and filled the cavity with ice. He wasn't here for the music. He was scanning the back corner of the room, his eyes tracking a nervous-looking man in a booth. A business deal. Something shady. Something that required the Wolf King of New York to descend from his tower and get his hands dirty. Elena froze. Her hand gripped the microphone stand so hard her knuckles turned white. "Don't look," she told herself. "He won't recognize you. You're just the entertainment. You're a ghost." The piano player started the intro to a slow, mournful ballad. Elena had no choice. She had to sing. If she ran now, she'd draw attention. If she ran, she wouldn't get paid. And Leo was hungry. She opened her mouth. The first note came out shaky, a breathy whisper. But then she found her strength. She let the pain of the last 7 years pour into the melody. She sang for the rain in the Hamptons. She sang for the lonely nights. She sang for the silence that had broken her. Roman was halfway across the room, reaching for a glass of whiskey a waitress had just placed on a table. He wasn't paying attention to the stage. He was focused on his prey in the corner booth. But then, he heard it. That voice. It was a sound that had haunted his nightmares for 2,555 days. a sound he had tried to drown in work, in money, in other women. Roman stopped. His hand froze around the crystal tumbler. Slowly, agonizingly, he turned his head. The club seemed to dissolve. The smoke, the crowd, the noise, it all vanished. There was only the stage. There was only the single spotlight cutting through the darkness. And there was her, Elena. She was looking right at him. She couldn't help it. It was magnetic, inevitable. Their eyes locked across the smoky room. In that split second, time bent. The distance between Queens and the Hamptons snapped shut. He saw the girl in the rain. She saw the boy who stayed silent. The shock on Roman's face was visceral. His pupils blew wide, swallowing the steel-gray irises. His nostrils flared, inhaling deeply, catching the scent that cut through the stale beer and cheap perfume. Vanilla, rain, and her. His grip on the glass tightened. Unconsciously, instinctively, the alpha inside him roared, clawing at the surface, recognizing the one thing it had lost. Crack. The sound was sharp and violent. The heavy crystal glass in Roman's hand didn't just break, it pulverized. Shards exploded outward, amber liquid splashing onto his expensive cuff, blood beginning to well in his palm from the jagged glass. But Roman didn't flinch. He didn't look at his bleeding hand. He didn't blink. He just stared at her, an expression of terrifying intensity dawning on his face. It wasn't joy. It wasn't relief. It was the look of a starving wolf that had finally found the scent of blood. The song died in Elena's throat. The music stopped. The ghost of the past wasn't a ghost anymore. He was flesh and blood. He was angry. And he was walking straight toward the stage. The music didn't just stop. It was murdered. The silence in the blue velvet was sudden and absolute, broken only by the echo of shattering crystal. Elena didn't wait for the applause. She didn't wait for the tip jar. She didn't even wait to breathe. Every instinct she had spent 7 years sharpening the instincts of a prey animal living in a predator's world screamed one word: run. She dropped the microphone. The feedback squealed, a high-pitched shriek that made the patrons wince. And she used that split second of distraction to bolt. She scrambled off the back of the stage, her heels clicking frantically against the scarred wooden floorboards. She tore through the velvet curtain, past the startled drummer, and threw her shoulder against the heavy steel door that led to the alley. The night air hit her like a wet towel. It was raining in Queens, a cold, miserable drizzle that smelled of wet cardboard and exhaust fumes. But to Elena, it smelled like freedom. She didn't look back. She knew what was coming. You don't grow up around shifters without learning the basics of biology. He didn't need to see her to find her. He had her scent now, vanilla and fear, and a wolf never loses a trail once the hunt has begun. She sprinted down the alley, splashing through puddles that soaked her cheap stockings. Her heart was a jackhammer against her ribs. Just get to the subway, she told herself. Just get underground. The scent is harder to track in the tunnels. She turned the corner, skidding on a patch of oil. She caught herself on a dumpster, gasping for air, her lungs burning, and then the shadows moved. She didn't hear him approach. An alpha doesn't make noise unless he wants to. One moment the alley was empty. The next, a wall of darkness blocked her path. Elena skid to a halt, but it was too late. Roman Sterling stepped out of the gloom. He looked terrifying. The street lamp above flickered, casting his face in sharp, jagged relief. His suit was immaculate, but the energy rolling off him was feral. His eyes were glowing, not the polite gray of the boardroom, but a luminous, predatory silver. Going somewhere, Elena? His voice was low, a rumble that vibrated through the soles of her shoes. She spun around to run the other way, but he was faster. In a blur of movement that the human eye couldn't even track, he was there. He caught her arm not hard enough to bruise, but firm enough to tell her that escape was a fantasy. He spun her around and pinned her against the rough brick wall. The impact knocked the breath out of her. They were close, dangerously close. His body pressed against hers, trapping her, encompassing her. For a terrifying electric second, Elena forgot to be afraid. She only felt the heat radiating from him, a furnace that defied the cold rain. It was a magnetic pull, ancient and undeniable, the kind of chemistry that had destroyed her life 7 years ago. She looked up at him, trembling. He was breathing hard, his chest heaving against hers. His hand was on the wall beside her head, boxing her in. The smell of him, sandalwood, rain, and raw power filled her senses, making her dizzy. "Let me go, Roman," she whispered, her voice shaking. Let you go? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was a dark, jagged sound. I let you go once, and you vanished like smoke. He leaned in, his face inches from hers. She could see the flecks of gold in his silver eyes. She could see the fury warring with something else, something hungry. 7 years? He snarled softly. 7 years I looked for you. 7 years I wondered why. You know why? She choked out. You made your choice. My choice? Roman's face twisted. The mask of the CEO slipped, revealing the wounded animal underneath. Is that what you tell yourself to sleep at night? That I chose the crown? That I chose the money? He slammed his hand against the brick, inches from her ear. She flinched. Silas told me everything. Elena, he hissed. He told me about the deal. He told me about the $50,000. Elena blinked, confusion cutting through her panic. What? Don't play the innocent. Not with me. Not anymore. Roman's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. He told me you came to him the night my father died. He told me you asked for a payout, 50 grand to disappear, 50 grand to run off with some bartender from the south side. The accusation hit her harder than the wall had. $50,000? He thought she had sold him? He thought she had sold us for the price of a mid-range sedan? I never. Elena gasped, shaking her head. Roman, that's a lie. Silas is lying. Is he? Roman grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. His touch was scorching. Then where did you go, Elena? A girl with no money, no family, no education. How does she survive in this city for 7 years without a benefactor? Did you spend it all? Is that why you're here? Singing for tips in a rat hole like this? I survived because I had to, she yelled back, a spark of anger finally igniting in her chest. I didn't take a dime from your family. I ran because your uncle told me. She stopped. She couldn't say it. Not here. Not when he looked like he wanted to tear the world apart. If she told him about the baby, about the threat to Leo's life, what would he do? Would he kill Silas? Or would he take Leo away? The fear of losing her son overpowered the need to defend herself. She clamped her mouth shut. Roman saw the hesitation. He took it as guilt. That's what I thought, he sneered, releasing her chin with a look of disgust that hurt more than his anger. But he didn't step back. He stayed in her space, his body heavy against hers. You're coming with me. No, she said. That wasn't a request. I have a life, Roman. You can't just drag me back to your tower because you're angry. Watch me. He reached for her hand again. Elena knew she couldn't overpower him. She couldn't outrun him, but she had prepared for this. For 7 years, she had carried a weapon in her purse, just in case the past ever caught up to her. She reached into her pocket, her fingers closing around a small, nondescript spray bottle. I said no. She pulled it out and sprayed a cloud of mist right between them. It wasn't pepper spray. It was worse. It was a concentrated blend of synthetic wolfsbane and heavy chemical masking agents, something she had bought on the black market in the Bronx. To a human, it smelled like strong ammonia. To a wolf with heightened senses, it was like a flashbang grenade going off in their nose. Roman roared, stumbling back. He clamped his hands over his face, coughing, his eyes watering violently. The scent blinded him, overloading his senses, cutting off his connection to her. Damn it, he bellowed, his voice echoing off the alley walls. Elena didn't wait to see if he recovered. She ran. She ran harder than she ever had in her life. She scrambled over a chain-link fence, tearing her dress, and sprinted toward the subway station. She didn't stop running until she was underground, buried in the noise and the grime of the E-train, praying that the chemical burn in his nose would buy her enough time to disappear again. The apartment was on the 4th floor of a walk-up in Astoria. It was a shoebox with peeling wallpaper and a radiator that clanked like a dying engine, but it was theirs. Elena burst through the door, locking the 3 deadbolts behind her with trembling hands. She leaned against the wood, sliding down to the floor, her chest heaving. She was safe. She was home. The spray had worked. She had lost him in the subway tunnels. She had doubled back twice, just to be sure. The apartment was quiet. The babysitter, Mrs. Gable, was asleep in the recliner, snoring softly. And there, on the pull-out couch, was a lump under a superhero blanket. Elena crawled over to him, brushing the hair off his forehead. He was sleeping soundly, his mouth slightly open, clutching a worn-out stuffed wolf. The irony of the toy wasn't lost on her. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears finally spilling over. I'm so sorry, baby. We have to leave. We have to go tonight. She stood up, her legs shaking. She needed to pack. Just the essentials. Clothes, the stash of emergency cash in the coffee can, Leo's inhaler. They could go to Jersey. Maybe Philly, somewhere the Sterling influence didn't reach. She took a step toward the bedroom. Boom. The sound wasn't a knock. It was a tectonic shift. The entire door frame shuddered, dust falling from the ceiling. Elena froze. Her heart stopped beating. No. It wasn't possible. She had covered her tracks. She had used the spray. Boom. Open it, Elena. Roman's voice came through the heavy steel door as clearly as if he were standing next to her. He wasn't yelling. He sounded calm. Terrifyingly. Unnaturally calm. He hadn't lost her. He had never lost her. The spray had only bought her a head start. He had let her run. He had let the rabbit lead him straight to the burrow. Elena looked at the deadbolts. They looked like toys now, flimsy pieces of metal against a force of nature. Go away, she screamed, backing up, putting herself between the door and Leo. Leave us alone. I'm not going to ask a third time, Roman said. Open the door, or I will take it off the hinges. Mrs. Gable woke up with a start. What? Who is that? Elena? Get out, Elena whispered to the older woman, her eyes wild. Mrs. Gable, go out the fire escape. Please, just go. The babysitter, sensing the violence in the air, didn't argue. She grabbed her purse and scrambled out the window. Elena was alone. The doorknob began to turn. The metal groaned, twisting under immense pressure. The deadbolt snapped with a sound like a gunshot. The door swung open. Roman filled the doorway. He was wet, his hair plastered to his forehead, his suit ruined by the rain. His chest was heaving. He looked wild, dangerous, a king who had been denied his property. He stepped into the tiny, cramped living room. His presence sucked all the oxygen out of the space. He looked at the peeling paint. He looked at the bucket catching water from the leaky ceiling. He looked at Elena, shivering in her torn dress. This, Roman said, his voice dripping with disdain, is where you've been hiding? This is what you bought with your 50 grand? Get out, Elena sobbed. Please, Roman, just leave. The small, sleepy voice cut through the tension like a blade. Roman froze. Elena squeezed her eyes shut. No. Leo sat up on the couch, rubbing his eyes. He was wearing mismatched pajamas, a striped top, and dinosaur bottoms. His hair was a messy black mop, sticking up in every direction. Mom? Leo asked again, his voice clearer now. He looked at the door. He looked at the giant, soaking wet stranger standing in their living room. Roman slowly turned his head. He looked at the boy, and the boy looked back. For a moment, the world stopped spinning. There was no sound, no rain, no anger. There was only biology. Leo didn't look scared. He should have been terrified of the intruder, but he wasn't. He tilted his head to the side, a gesture so identical to Roman's that it made Elena's stomach lurch. Leo scrambled off the couch and stood up. He was small, barely coming up to Roman's knee, but he stood with his feet planted apart, his chin lifted, defiant, curious. Who are you? Leo asked. Roman stared. He stared at the messy black hair. He stared at the stubborn set of the jaw. But mostly, he stared at the eyes. Steel gray, storm cloud gray, sterling gray. The realization hit Roman with the force of a physical blow. You could see it ripple through his body. His knees almost buckled. The color drained from his face, leaving him ghostly pale. He did the math. 7 years. The missing girl. The oversized coat she had worn that last week. The way she had clutched her stomach in the alley tonight. It wasn't a betrayal. It wasn't another man. It was this. Roman took a step forward, his movements jerky, uncoordinated. He looked like a man waking up from a coma. Roman's voice cracked. The alpha tone was gone, replaced by a raw, bleeding whisper. He has my eyes. Elena stepped in front of Leo, shielding him with her body. She was trembling so hard her teeth chattered. He's mine, she hissed. He's my son. You have no claim here. Roman looked at her. The shock in his eyes began to fade, replaced by something hotter, something heavier. The anger returned, but it had changed. It wasn't the cold, sharp anger of a scorned lover anymore. It was the volcanic, molten rage of a father who finds his cub living in a cave. He looked around the apartment again. This time, he really saw it. He saw the draft coming from the window that barely closed. He saw the empty refrigerator humming in the corner. He saw the thinness of the blanket Leo had been sleeping under. He smelled the poverty, the scent of stale ramen and laundry detergent stretched too thin. His son, his heir, the blood of the Sterling line, living in a place where the wind cut through the walls. A low growl started deep in Roman's chest. It was involuntary, a primal vibration that shook the floorboards. He walked past Elena. He walked straight to the small, battered closet in the hallway. "What are you doing?" Elena cried, grabbing his arm. He ignored her. He grabbed a duffel bag from the top shelf and threw it onto the floor. "Pack," Roman said. "What?" "Pack your bags." He turned to face her, and the look in his eyes was terrifying. It was absolute. Pack his things. The inhaler, the toy, nothing else. We buy everything else new. "No!" Elena shouted, kicking the bag away. "I'm not going anywhere with you. You can't just waltz in here and—" "Look around you, Elena," Roman roared, the sound filling the tiny room, making the windows rattle. He pointed a shaking finger at Leo, who was watching them with wide, intelligent eyes. "That is my son," Roman snarled. "That is the heir to the Sterling pack, and he is sleeping on a pull-out couch in a building that should be condemned." He took a step closer to her, invading her space, looming over her like a thunderhead. "I don't care what you think of me. I don't care if you hate me. But I will be damned if I let my blood freeze in a shoebox in Queens while I sleep in a penthouse." "I took care of him," Elena yelled back, tears streaming down her face. "I kept him safe. I loved him when you weren't there." "You kept him hidden," Roman fired back. "You stole 7 years from me." He took a deep breath, fighting for control. He adjusted his cuffs, the mask of the CEO sliding back into place, though the cracks were still visible. "You have 2 choices," Roman said, his voice deadly quiet. "You pack a bag, and you come with me to the tower. Tonight. Right now." He paused, his gray eyes hardening into steel. "Or," he continued, "I call my lawyers. I call child services. I show them this apartment. I show them your bank account. And I take him legally. I have the best lawyers in the city, Elena. I will bury you in paperwork so deep you won't see the sun for a decade. And I will get custody. I will get him." Elena stared at him. She saw the resolve in his face. She knew he wasn't bluffing. She had fought monsters to keep Leo safe, but she couldn't fight the Sterling billions, not in a courtroom. "Do not test me, Elena," Roman whispered, the threat hanging in the cold air between them. "I have lost enough time. I am not losing another second." Elena looked at the duffel bag on the floor. She looked at Leo, who was shivering slightly in his thin pajamas. She had run for 7 years, but tonight, the road had finally run out. Slowly, defeated, she knelt down and picked up the bag. The elevator ride to the penthouse of the Sterling Tower took 40 seconds. 40 seconds to rise from the grimy, rain-slicked streets of the city into the stratosphere. 40 seconds to leave behind the life Elena Vance had built from scraps and step into a world made of glass, steel, and old money. When the doors slid open, Leo gasped. It was the first sound he had made since they left Queens. He stepped out onto the marble floor, his worn-out sneakers squeaking against the polished stone, his eyes wide as saucers. To a 6-year-old, it was a castle. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the Manhattan skyline, a glittering ocean of lights that stretched to the horizon. There were chandeliers that looked like frozen waterfalls and furniture that cost more than Elena would earn in 10 lifetimes. But to Elena, it didn't look like a castle. It looked like a cage, a beautiful, gilded, air-conditioned cage. She gripped Leo's hand tighter, pulling him close to her leg. She could feel the vibration of the building, the hum of power both electrical and political. This was Roman's territory, his den, and she was the intruder. "Welcome home," Roman said. His voice was flat, devoid of warmth. He walked past them, tossing his wet jacket onto a velvet armchair without looking back. But they weren't alone. A woman was sitting on the white leather sofa, sipping a glass of red wine. She was perfect. That was the only word for her. Bianca Street Claire. Her blonde hair was a sleek curtain of silk. Her dress was a shade of cream that would stain if you even looked at it wrong, and her posture was sharp enough to cut glass. She stood up as they entered, her blue eyes scanning Elena from her messy hair to her cheap, water-stained boots. The judgment was instant and absolute. "Roman," Bianca purred, stepping forward to kiss his cheek. She didn't look at him. She kept her eyes on Elena, You're late. And you brought company? Roman stiffened. Bianca. I didn't expect you here. I have a key, darling. We're practically engaged. Remember? She finally turned her gaze to Leo, her nose wrinkling slightly as if she smelled something unpleasant. And who is this? I didn't know you were running a charity for strays. Elena felt her spine stiffen. She stepped in front of Leo, blocking him from the woman's icy stare. He's not a stray, Elena said, her voice trembling but fierce. He's his son. The silence that followed was suffocating. Bianca's wineglass paused halfway to her lips. She looked at Roman, waiting for the denial, waiting for him to laugh. But Roman didn't laugh. He looked at Bianca with eyes like flint. Careful, Bianca, he warned, his voice low and dangerous. You are speaking about the heir to this company. Show some respect, or show yourself out. Bianca paled. She looked at the boy again, really looked at him and saw the sterling eyes. The resemblance was undeniable. She took a step back, her perfect mask cracking for the first time. I see, she whispered, her voice tight. Well, that complicates things, doesn't it? She grabbed her purse, shooting Elena a look of pure, distilled venom, and stormed out. The elevator doors closed, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. Roman didn't explain. He didn't apologize. He just looked at Leo. You must be hungry, he said, the awkwardness thick in his voice. We have food. Dinner was a disaster. They sat at a dining table long enough to land a plane on. Roman sat at the head, Elena and Leo on the side. A private chef had prepared steaks, rare, bloody, expensive cuts of meat, meant to appeal to the wolf senses. Leo stared at the plate like it was an alien object. He poked the meat with his fork. It's filet mignon, Roman said, trying to sound encouraging. It's good. Try it. Leo looked at Roman, then at Elena. His little face was set in a scowl that mirrored his father's perfectly. My mom cuts it for me, he said defiantly. Roman froze. He looked at the knife in his own hand, then at his son. He realized, with a pang of guilt that pierced his anger, that he didn't know how to be a father. He didn't know what a 6-year-old ate. He didn't know their bedtime. He had missed the first steps, the first words, the first lost tooth. Right, Roman murmured. He reached over, taking Leo's plate. With precise, gentle movements, the Alpha of New York cut the meat into tiny, bite-sized pieces. He pushed the plate back. Better? Leo hesitated. He took a bite, chewed, and his eyes lit up. It's good, he admitted. Yeah, Roman said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. It is. Elena watched them, her heart aching. She saw the connection, the pull of blood. Roman wasn't a monster to the boy. He was trying. And that scared her more than his anger, because if Leo loved him, how could she ever take him away? Later that night, the penthouse was quiet. Leo was asleep in a guest room bigger than their entire apartment in Queens, surrounded by new toys he was too overwhelmed to play with. Elena couldn't sleep. The adrenaline was still coursing through her veins, mixed with the residual fear of the hunt. She needed to move. She needed to burn it off. She found the gym on the second floor of the penthouse. It was a state-of-the-art studio with a wall of mirrors and a polished wood floor. She didn't turn on the lights. The glow of the city outside was enough. She took off her shoes. She closed her eyes, and she began to move. She didn't dance the way she did at the club. This wasn't for show. This wasn't for tips. This was for survival. She spun, her body flowing like water, releasing the tension stored in her muscles. She danced out the fear, the anger, the confusion. She danced for the girl who had stood in the rain 7 years ago, and for the mother who had fought to survive every day since. She didn't hear the door open. Roman stood in the entryway, watching her. He should have been sleeping. He should have been calling his lawyers. But he couldn't get her scent out of his head. It was everywhere in the house now, vanilla and rain clinging to the furniture, the air, his skin. He watched her spin in the moonlight. She was mesmerizing. The cheap dress she wore couldn't hide the grace of her movements. She looked like a spirit, ethereal and untouchable. His anger, which he had been nursing like a shield all night, began to crack. He remembered this. He remembered her. The way she moved, the way she felt in his arms, the betrayal Silas had told him about the money. The other man, it felt impossible when he looked at her now. A woman who sold her soul for cash didn't dance with this kind of sorrow. Elena finished a turn and stopped, chest heaving. She opened her eyes and saw him in the mirror. She spun around. gasping. I didn't know you were there." Roman walked into the room. He didn't stop until he was standing right in front of her. The air between them crackled, charged with the static electricity of 7 years of unsaid words. "You're good," he said, his voice rough. "Better than before." "I had to be," she whispered. "It pays the rent." The reminder of her poverty made his jaw tighten. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face, almost touching her cheek. "Why, Elena?" he asked, the words torn from him. "Why did you run? We could have—" "I could have fixed it." "You didn't want to fix it," she said, tears pricking her eyes. "You stood there and let them throw me away." "I was trying to save you," he snapped, stepping closer. "My father was dying. The pack was circling like vultures. If I had claimed you then, they would have torn you apart. I needed time. I just needed time." "You had 7 years," she breathed. Roman stared at her. His gaze dropped to her lips. The pull was unbearable. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to crush her against him and forget the past. Forget the lies. Forget the $50,000. He leaned in, his breath brushing against her skin. Elena didn't pull away. Her heart hammered against his chest. She wanted it too. God help her. She wanted him. But just as his lips were about to touch hers, Roman pulled back. He stiffened, the ice returning to his eyes. "She took the money," a voice whispered in his head. "She sold you out. Go to sleep, Elena," he said coldly, turning his back on her. "Tomorrow is a long day." He walked out, leaving her alone in the dark, shivering from the loss of his heat. The next morning, the sun flooded the penthouse with blinding, unforgiving light. Elena was in the kitchen, trying to figure out how to work a coffee machine that looked like it belonged on a spaceship, when she heard the scream. It wasn't a play scream. It was a sound of pure terror. She dropped the mug. It shattered on the floor, but she was already running. She sprinted into the hallway, toward the grand foyer. The staircase in the penthouse was a floating masterpiece of glass and steel. Beautiful, architectural, and deadly. Leo was at the top of the landing. He had been chasing a marble, running in his socks on the slippery glass surface. Bianca was there too, standing a few feet away. Having just arrived for a morning meeting, she had watched him run. She hadn't said a word. Elena rounded the corner just in time to see Leo's foot slip. "No!" she screamed. Leo tumbled. He hit the first step, his small body flailing, heading straight for the sharp edge of the glass railing. Elena lunged, but she was too far away. She was human. She was too slow. But Roman wasn't. He appeared out of nowhere, a blur of motion that defied physics. 1 second he was in his study. The next, he was in the air. He didn't run. He flowed. He vaulted over the banister, moving with the terrifying speed of a wolf protecting its cub. He caught Leo midair, inches before his head hit the steel edge of the step. They crashed onto the landing together, Roman taking the brunt of the impact, curling his body around the boy to shield him. Silence echoed through the penthouse. "Leo!" Elena fell to her knees beside them, her hands shaking so hard she could barely touch him. "Leo, baby, are you okay? Let me see." Roman sat up, breathing hard. He unwrapped his arms from the boy. Leo was pale, his eyes wide with shock. There was a small cut on his forehead, where he had grazed the edge of the carpet, bleeding sluggishly. I fell," Leo whimpered, and then the tears came. "It's okay," Roman said, his voice surprisingly steady, though his eyes were wild. I've got you. He looked up at Elena, and what he saw stopped him cold. Elena wasn't looking at Roman. She wasn't looking at Bianca. She was solely focused on her son. She was checking his limbs, wiping the blood from his forehead with her sleeve, murmuring frantic, broken prayers. Her face was a mask of absolute, unadulterated terror. She was shaking violently. It wasn't the reaction of a woman playing a part. It wasn't the reaction of a gold digger who viewed the child as a meal ticket. It was the raw, visceral panic of a mother who almost lost her world. "Get the doctor," Roman barked at a stunned maid who had appeared in the hallway. "Now!" 20 minutes later, the pack doctor, an elderly man with kind eyes, was finishing up a small bandage on Leo's forehead. "He's fine," the doctor assured them, packing up his bag. "A little shaken, a small cut, but he's a tough kid. The alpha blood is strong in him." Leo was asleep, exhausted by the adrenaline crash, holding Elena's hand. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, her shoulders slumped. She looked defeated. Small. Roman stood by the window, watching her. The anger that had fueled him for 24 hours was gone, replaced by a gnawing, uncomfortable feeling in his gut. Doubt. He had watched her with Leo. He had seen the way she lived in Queens. He had seen the fear in her eyes when he cornered her in the alley, not fear of him, but fear for the boy. The narrative didn't fit. The pieces of the puzzle Silas had given him were jamming together wrong. A woman who took $50,000 to party in Europe doesn't end up singing in a dive bar in Queens with a hole in her shoe. A woman who didn't care about him doesn't keep a stuffed wolf toy for her son for 7 years. Roman walked over to the bed. He reached out, his hand hesitating, then resting gently on Elena's arm. She flinched, but she didn't pull away. She looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. "Elena," he said softly. "He could have died," she whispered. "This place. It's not safe for him." "We don't belong here, Roman." "You do belong here," he corrected, surprising himself. "He is my son. You are his mother." He sat down on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. He looked deep into her eyes, searching for the deception he had been told was there. He couldn't find it. "I need to know," Roman said, his voice low and intense. "And I need the truth. No more stories, no more defenses." He leaned closer, his gray eyes piercing her soul. "If you took the money, why are you poor? If you wanted to leave me, why did you keep him?" Elena looked at him. She saw the crack in his armor. She saw the man she had loved beneath the monster he was trying to be. "I didn't take the money, Roman," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I paid it." Roman frowned, confusion clouding his face. "What?" "I didn't take $50,000, she said, a tear sliding down her cheek. "I gave it. I gave Silas everything I had saved, every penny my mother left me." "Why?" Roman breathed. "Why would you pay him?" Elena took a deep breath. It was time. The secret that had kept them running, the secret that had almost killed her, had to come out. "I paid him," she said, her voice trembling, "so that he wouldn't kill your son." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and suffocating. "I paid him so that he wouldn't kill your son." Roman stopped breathing. The air in the penthouse seemed to crystallize, the temperature dropping 10 degrees in a heartbeat. He looked at Elena, really looked at her, and for the first time, he didn't see a woman who had run away. He saw a woman who had survived a war he didn't even know was being fought. "What did you say?" Roman's voice was a jagged whisper. It sounded like glass grinding under a boot heel. Elena stepped back, trembling, but she didn't retreat. She reached into her purse, the worn, cheap leather bag she'd carried from Queens, and pulled out a phone. It wasn't her current phone. It was an ancient model, screen cracked, battery taped in place. She had kept it charged for 7 years. Not for nostalgia, for insurance. "He came to the servants' quarters the night you buried your father," Elena said, her voice shaking but gaining strength with every word. "He told me that human girls who carry alpha pups have accidents. He told me stairs are slippery. He told me brakes fail." She pressed a button on the old phone. The speaker crackled with static. And then, a voice filled the silent luxury bedroom. It was younger, smoother, but unmistakably Silas Thorne. "Take the deal, girl. Or don't. But know this. If that child breathes his first breath on sterling soil, it will be his last. I will not let a mongrel pollute this bloodline. Leave tonight, pay the exit fee, and I let you live. Stay, and I bury you both." The recording clicked off. Roman didn't move. He stood like a statue carved from obsidian. But beneath the stillness, something terrifying was happening. The Ice King of New York wasn't melting. He was vaporizing. The cold, calculated CEO was gone, incinerated by a white-hot, volcanic rage that threatened to level the entire city. His hands clenched into fists so tight the knuckles turned white, then red as nails dug into palms. A low, vibrating growl started in his chest, a sound so deep it rattled the window panes. It wasn't human. It was the Alpha, waking up to the realization that the enemy wasn't at the gate. The enemy was sleeping in the master bedroom. 7 years. He had lost 7 years. He had missed Leo's first steps. He had missed the first time he said dad. He had spent 2,000 nights hating the only woman he ever loved, all because his uncle had sold him a lie to keep the stock price up. "He threatened my pup," Roman whispered. The words weren't English anymore. They were a death sentence. He turned toward the door, He didn't say goodbye. He didn't look back. He moved with a terrifying purpose, radiating a heat so intense that Elena had to shield her face as he passed. The hunt was on. And this time, the prey was family. The boardroom of Sterling Corp was a fortress of glass and arrogance suspended 50 stories above Manhattan. The air conditioning was set to a crisp 68 degrees. The table was mahogany, polished to a mirror shine. At the head of the table sat Silas Thorne. He looked good for a man in his 60s, tanned, silver-haired, wearing a suit that cost more than Elena's entire building. He was smiling. The merger with Street Claire Industries is the only logical step, Silas told the 12 board members seated around him. Roman has been distracted lately. Emotional. We need stability. We need the marriage to Bianca to finalize the alliance. And we need to vote on my motion to assume temporary control of the alpha duties. The board members nodded like bobbleheads. They were afraid of Silas. They knew what happened to people who voted against him. Do we have a second? Silas asked, his smile widening. I second the motion. A nervous executive squeaked. Excellent. All in favor. Boom. The double doors of the boardroom didn't open. They exploded inward. The heavy oak panels slammed against the walls with a crack like thunder, splintering the wood. Every head in the room snapped toward the entrance. Roman Sterling walked in. He wasn't wearing his jacket. His tie was gone. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with tension. But it was his face that made the blood run cold in the veins of every man in that room. His eyes were glowing. Bright, luminous silver. He didn't sit. He stalked. He moved around the perimeter of the table like a tiger circling a cage, his gaze fixed solely on Silas. Roman, Silas said, his smile faltering just a fraction. We were just discussing. Get out of my chair, Roman said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command. A command laced with alpha power that hit the room like a physical wave. 3 board members whimpered. Silas stood up, trying to maintain his composure. Now, Roman, let's not make a scene. We have a vote to. Roman reached the head of the table. He didn't stop. He grabbed Silas by the lapels of his $3,000 suit and slammed him onto the polished mahogany. Papers flew everywhere. Water pitchers tipped over. You stole 7 years, Roman snarled, leaning down until his nose was an inch from his uncle's. You stole my mate. You threatened my son. I did what was necessary. Silas choked out, struggling against the supernatural strength pinning him down. She was a weakness, a maid. I protected the asset. You protected your bonus, Roman roared. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the old, cracked phone. He slammed it onto the table and hit play. The voice of Silas Thorne filled the room again, echoing off the glass walls. I will not let a mongrel pollute this bloodline. I bury you both. The silence that followed was absolute. The board members looked at the floor, at the walls, anywhere but at the man pinned to the table. Attempted murder of an heir was not just a crime. In the pack, it was treason. Roman pulled Silas up and shoved him toward the door. Silas stumbled, straightening his jacket, trying to regain some shred of dignity. You can't fire me, Silas spat, his eyes darting around the room for support. I am a director. I have tenure. I have the Street Claire vote. I'm not firing you, Roman said. His voice dropped, becoming deadly calm. I am exiling you. Gasps rippled through the room. Exile was a fate worse than death. It meant being stripped of the pack bond. It meant going rogue hunted, alone, slowly going mad from the isolation. I strip you of the Sterling name, Roman declared, the air shimmering around him as the magic of the decree took hold. I strip you of your blood. You are nothing. You are no one. He pointed to the shattered doors. If you are in this city by sundown, Silas, I will hunt you myself. And I will not be as merciful as a human court. Silas looked at the board members. No one moved. He looked at Roman and saw his death in those silver eyes. With a whimper of terror, the man who had pulled the strings for decades turned and ran. Roman stood panting, the adrenaline crashing through his system. He turned to the table. Does anyone else have a problem with my leadership? Silence. Good. Roman looked at the empty chair. Now, about this merger. Actually, a voice cut in. We need to talk about the marriage. It was Bianca St. Clair. She stood up from the far end of the table. She looked impeccable as always, her blonde hair perfect, her expression unreadable. Roman tensed. If the Street Clair family pulled out now, The stock would tank. Silas had been right about that much. "Bianca," Roman said, his voice warning. "Now is not the time." "It is exactly the time," Bianca said. She walked around the table, her heels clicking rhythmically. She didn't walk toward Roman. She walked toward Marcus. Marcus, Roman's head of security and best friend, had been standing silently in the corner, his hand on his weapon. He had watched the entire takedown without moving. Bianca stopped in front of him. The room held its breath. "I'm tired of the politics, Roman," Bianca said, turning to face the alpha. "I'm tired of pretending I want to marry you. No offense, you're very handsome, but you're not him." She reached out and took Marcus's hand. The beta, the stoic soldier, looked at her with an expression of pure, unadulterated adoration. "We've been fated mates for 2 years, Bianca announced, lifting her chin. But Silas threatened to ruin Marcus's career if we went public. He needed the royal wedding for the share prices. She squeezed Marcus's hand, and he stepped forward, finally claiming his place beside her. "The Street Claire family stands with the true alpha," Bianca declared, looking at the stunned board members. "And we stand with his choice of Luna. If Roman wants the girl from Queens, then the girl from Queens is who we support." Roman looked at his best friend. He looked at the woman he had almost been forced to marry, and for the first time in 7 years, he smiled. It was a small, tired smile, but it was real. "Meeting adjourned," Roman said. He turned and walked out of the boardroom. He had a family to put back together. The sun was setting over Manhattan by the time Roman returned to the penthouse. The war in the boardroom was over. Silas was gone, exiled to the shadows where he belonged. The stock prices, the mergers, the legacy, none of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was waiting for him on the balcony, watching the city lights flicker to life. Elena turned as he stepped out into the cool evening air. She didn't run this time. She didn't look for an exit. She just watched him, her eyes searching for the man beneath the monster he had been forced to become. Roman stopped a few feet away. He looked exhausted, stripped of his armor, stripped of his pride. And then, the Alpha of New York did the unthinkable. Slowly, deliberately, Roman Sterling dropped to his knees. He didn't kneel like a subject before a queen. He knelt like a man offering his soul. He took Elena's hands in his grip trembling with the weight of 7 lost years. "I thought I was saving you," Roman whispered, his voice cracking. "I thought if I let you go, you would be safe. I told myself I was doing the noble thing." He looked up at her, tears shimmering in those steel-gray eyes. "I built this empire to forget you, Elena. I filled this tower with gold and glass, trying to drown out the silence you left behind. But standing there today, I realized it's all worthless. It's just dust. It means nothing without you." Elena felt her own tears spill over. She reached down, cupping his face, feeling the rough stubble against her palms. "I don't want the empire, Roman," she said softly. "I never did. I just wanted you." "Then take me," he breathed. "All of me." He didn't pull a ring from his pocket. That was too human, too temporary. Instead, he closed his eyes and opened the bond, the ancient, primal connection that tied shifters to their mates. The air around them shimmered, heavy with magic and the scent of rain and sandalwood. It was a promise written in blood and soul, a tether that not even death could sever. "Be my Luna," Roman asked. "Be my equal. Let me spend the rest of my life making up for the years I stole." "Yes," Elena whispered. "Yes." Roman stood up, pulling her into his arms. And when he kissed her, it wasn't just a kiss. It was a collision. It was 7 years of hunger, of anger, of desperate longing finally finding its home. They held each other as the city watched below, 2 broken pieces finally fusing back together. 1 month later, the flashbulbs popped like starlight against the winter darkness outside the Metropolitan Museum. It was the annual Sterling Winter Gala, the most exclusive event in the city. The press line was 10 deep, reporters shouting questions, desperate for a glimpse of the reclusive billionaire. The black limousine pulled up to the curb. A hush fell over the crowd. The door opened, and Roman Sterling stepped out. He looked powerful, commanding, the undisputed king of the city. But he wasn't alone. He reached back into the car and helped a small boy onto the red carpet. Leo, looking sharp in a miniature tuxedo, waved shyly at the cameras. And then, Roman offered his hand one last time. Elena stepped out. She was breathtaking. She wore a gown of midnight blue silk that seemed to flow like water, shimmering with silver thread. She didn't look like a maid. She didn't look like a struggling lounge singer. She held her head high, radiating a quiet, fierce strength that silenced the critics before they could even speak. They walked the carpet together, Roman on the left, Elena on the right, and their son safe in the middle. A united front. A pack. A bold reporter thrust a microphone forward, breaking the silence. "Mr. Sterling, who is this? Is this the mystery woman from Queens?" Roman stopped. He turned to the cameras, his arm sliding possessively around Elena's waist. He looked at the lens with that dangerous, steel-gray stare. "This," Roman said, his voice carrying clearly over the noise of the city, "is Elena Sterling. My wife." He looked down at Leo, then back at the world. "And she is the mother of the heir. Any further questions?" He didn't wait for an answer. He turned to his wife, offered her a small, private smile, and led his family up the stairs, leaving the flashing lights behind them. And that is the story of how the Wolf King finally found his queen. What do you think? Would you have forgiven Roman after 7 years? Or did he get off too easy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. It really helps us out. And don't forget to subscribe to Lunar Wolf Tales and ring the bell so you never miss a new romance. Until next time.